Good afternoon and welcome to a Friday edition of the PHLY Eagles Show. I'm Zach Berman. That's Fran Duffy. Julia Hoff is producing. We are remote today because Fran Duffy, the top draft analyst in the business, the hardest working person at ALLCITY, is prepping for the combine. The next time you see Fran, he will be in Indianapolis. And so we will celebrate the pending departure to Indianapolis with a mailbag episode, something you and I enjoy. And Bo Wolf, who's not on today, it's not his favorite kind of show. So, Fran, I need to ask, I would say, how are you? But I'm actually more curious. You've been grinding film, become a diehard so you can read Fran's draft guide. Are you at the point now where when you sleep, you see Georgia versus Kentucky in your dreams?
Well, those dreams started in like December, Zach. Now it's more. I'm like I'm dreaming of what is in the database? What do I need to adjust? Those are the things now where I'm losing sleep over. But no, it's we're getting into the thick of it, and now it's fun because all 32 fan bases are officially in draft season. So that's one of the reasons why I love the combine.
Yeah, next week this will go into higher gear. Fran and I will be there. Fran will be there mostly for the draft at whole. I'll be there mostly for the Eagles component of it, right? But we will be doing shows from out there. We will have all your information. And the good thing is when we submitted questions for this mailbag, a lot of draft questions in there. So this is a good primer for what's to come. Make sure, though, you also check out the draft show with Fran, with Bo, that is up now on YouTube. And we submitted questions, or I should say we asked for questions, and the questions you submitted were awesome. I need to say, Bo, I'm sorry to tell you, there were so many questions, so many good ones on a range of topics. We have different categories here. We have draft category, we have off-season category, we have some fun. But the place to start here is with Myles Garrett, because the most questions we received were about Myles Garrett, and that shows that this is a topic that is on the minds of Eagles fans. And this also ties into the draft too. So the way we'll start this is, and this one is from Sam, with the Myles Garrett to the Eagles buzz, especially with the huge cap spike, wouldn't it be the complete wrong decision to trade valuable picks for him with this current hot streak of hitting developing players on cost-controlled rookie deals? In addition, there was a question, Peckness migrate the line trade edition, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, and Sam Hubbard. And then from Johnny Tremaine, what would you offer in a potential trade for Myles Garrett? But let's start with the first one, because this is really the big question here, is that Myles Garrett, obviously one of the great players in the NFL, perhaps the best defensive player, but the cost will be a first-round plus. Let's even disregard the contract. Let's look at this from a compensation perspective. The cost will be first-round plus. The Eagles are, as the question noted, on a roll here with first-round picks. When you look at Quinyon Mitchell, when you look at Nolan Smith, when you look at Jalen Carter. And so you're looking at the number 32 pick, potentially a first-round pick next year. I'll open the floor to you. What do you think of a Myles Garrett trade?
I mean, I personally would love a Myles Garrett trade. The thing that makes it difficult, if you're the Eagles, if you're the Cleveland Browns, it's when you're talking about a trade in season or even in the offseason looking ahead to next year, trading first round picks, like there's a value to that. There's a cachet to that. When you're talking about trading picks for this draft and you have a number attached to it, and in theory, you have now like names that we can attach to that, right? So, the Eagles holding the 32nd pick, you're Cleveland Browns, if you're talking about, okay, yeah, it's a first round pick, but insert edge rusher from the 32nd pick. What else do I need other than that player in order to make us right, to make us whole, on this deal? Is another first round pick enough? Probably not. You probably need even a little bit more than that. And so I do think it makes making a deal for Myles Garrett a little bit more on the unrealistic side of the ledger here for the Eagles, just because, and also too, I think if you're Cleveland, honestly, you're probably looking more picks down the road, in 2026, 2027, even as they continue their hunt for a quarterback. And so I would love, look, Myles Garrett has not lost any steam. Obviously, the Eagles played them in week 5. So a while ago where I did my deep dive on the Browns, but, just watching crossover tape against, Pittsburgh and Baltimore as the season progressed, Myles Garrett is the best edge rusher in football. So being able to add him to what the Eagles have is surely alluring, but I think it's you have to worry about how realistic it is. I think you might be muted, Zach. I think you're muted.
All right. As I was tilting my camera, the
go.
microphone adjustment changed. The mic changed. Before I give my take on Myles Garrett, I'm curious. It's obvious that whoever you draft at number 32 is not comparable to Myles Garrett. That's a futile discussion here, right? But you obviously look at the player on a cost controlled contract plus how you would allocate $30 million. Who would be the realistic options at 32? So what would and let's look at this purely from an edge rusher perspective. Let's say the Eagles were addressing edge rusher at 32 to join J.L. Hunt and Nolan Smith, potentially Bryce Huff. Who are the options there? And is it a player who would be a contributing player in 2025?
Yeah, it definitely is someone that would contribute into this rotation for certain. I mean, especially if you factor in the fact that, J.L. Hunt, like, are you counting on him as a starter to replace Josh Sweat in year 2? I think you're probably looking at him more to still be a platoon player. What is Bryce Huff's role? Is Brandon Graham back? So I would imagine that if you're going to bring in another edge rusher, whether that's through free agency or whether that's through the draft, that's going to need to be, someone that can come in and play major snaps. And so I think if you're talking 32nd overall, some of the names, that just come off the top of my head, I would say JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State, Landon Jackson from Arkansas, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. Really, I mean, look, that's one of the things about the combine is that's going to kind of sort out this pecking order because you have a huge glut of round 1 edge rushers. People are kind of all over the place on, is Myles Williams, he's probably going to go high. Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M, he's probably going to go high. After that, there's that big group of players where you're not sure, are they going to go 15? Are they going to go 32? Or are they going to go 41 overall, right? It's going to be really interesting to see how the pecking order goes there with those players. But that's one of the beauties of the combine is being able to sort through all of that in real time.
It does seem 20 to 40 is a range when there will be a number of edge rushers that go off the board. My view on Myles Garrett, similar to you, look, he's an elite player, and I think it's worth trading first-round picks for elite players, and the Eagles believe the same. They did it for Jason Peters. They did it for A.J. Brown. So this isn't something that they are immune or that they're against. They've done it. They've seen it. Myles Garrett's a different situation from an age profile, and this is something I'm going to explore when I'm out in the combine this week to see if there's certain parameters the Eagles have there. Myles Garrett will be in his age 29 season this year. His birthday is late December. He turns 30 in December. That's an older player than what A.J. Brown was. That's an older player than what Jason Peters was. You look at the historical precedent of some first-round trades, like Khalil Mack. He was traded for 2 1s, right? He was 2 years younger at the time or 3 years younger at the time. The Eagles were interested in Jalen Ramsey. They offered a first-round pick for Jalen Ramsey. He was like 24, 25 years old at the time. Odell Beckham traded for a first-round pick. He was younger. So it's a little different when you're looking at an age 29 player. I also wouldn't give up a first-round pick next year. I'm always worried about trading the future first because you don't know where that, you could say it's going to be at the bottom of the draft. Jalen Hurts gets hurt. We've seen that year after the Super Bowl not go well at times for the Eagles, right? So I would be more interested in, if it's 32 this year, let's say a second next year, okay? I don't know what else would be in there because you're looking at a first plus. Yeah, I'm talking. If it's a first this year and a first next year, I'd be a little more resistant to that because of the age profile and because of the money that's required. The other part too, though, is that you're also looking at what that contract would be. But also, look, Myles Garrett has a say here too. He could limit the market. He could say, I want to play in Philadelphia. I don't want to sign an extension somewhere else. And that would obviously drive down the price. So there's a few factors there. But I did want to get your take on the other parts of this question. Real quick, Peck Nest Migrate, Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, Sam Hubbard.
You would nest Myles Garrett. I think you're pecking. You're pecking. from the Raiders, Max Crosby, and then you are migrating Sam Hubbard. I think that to me, like we're talking multiple teams between Hubbard and the rest and those other two. So I think at the end of the day, that's an easy one for me.
So all right, so good Myles Garrett conversation there. I would do the same thing. I think Sam Hubbard's a little, you look at the advanced numbers this year was not particularly productive. So I would nest Garrett, I would peck Crosby, I would migrate Hubbard. Let's move on to the draft questions because look, Combine's next week. We're in draft season. Joy, we're going to jump to the second one here because I want to do a player-specific one first before we do a theoretical one. And this is one that's right in Fran's wheelhouse. How likely is it that a guy like Walter Nolen falls to the Eagles? Probably my Ole Miss bias, but that feels like a dream scenario, especially if Milton Williams does not come back. Also, your favorite deli decides to name a sandwich after you and allows you to build it. What is it? This is from Holflax24. I hope I pronounced that correctly. My pronunciations have been a point of discussion on this show. So let's start with Walter Nolen here. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Walter Nolen is a top 20, top 25 talent in this draft. I felt that the first time I watched him back in the fall. A player that I watched honestly while studying him, that I wrote down while studying him, was Jalen Carter in terms of just like the flashes you saw, the explosiveness, the power, the ability to win in multitude of ways. He went down to the Senior Bowl and really flashed down there. So look, if he fell to 32. You never say never because, I had Nolan Smith as a top 10 player in the 2023 class, and he fell to the Eagles at the end of the first round. And so that was certainly unexpected. I think at the end of the day, though, especially in this class, I would find it hard to believe that Walter Nolen would fall that far. That said, look, you're seeing it happen in a lot of mock drafts. It's still a little bit early, but my guess is that Nolen probably is not on the board for the Eagles.
If I could ask you this, because I think a lot of these questions stem from people looking at mock drafts, using mock draft simulators, right? What's your sense of like how accurate the range of outcomes are at this point? I have a first-round mock draft coming out, or I'm sorry, a 3-round mock draft, the Eagles 3-round mock draft coming out on Monday, and I'm doing that same exercise that the fans are doing. You're looking, you don't want to be unrealistic. You're kind of looking at the range for certain players. How realistic do you find the ranges this time of year?
I think it depends on the source, certainly. Because I track drafts and just get a sense of like, okay, who are we talking about and what range, what players being connected to which teams, that kind of thing. Obviously some analysts are better at that than others, and I think when you look at the long term success in terms of who's pretty good at being able to get a roundabout range of where these players are. I think that there is some value to that. But that said, like if I'm just reading like, I don't want to throw anyone in a bus. I'm not just reading like any mock draft that comes across my timeline and carrying that weight. But I think when you look at the Daniel Jeremiahs, the Mel Kuypers, certainly the Dane Bruglers, right? We start going through, the biggest analysts there. Their words carry weight, and it's we know to me like. I take this not just with mock drafts, but when it comes to like all news, right? Like news reports, like all that stuff. If you trust the analyst, if you trust the insider, you trust the reporter, then you trust their sources in terms of what they're saying when it comes to where players are likely to go in the draft as we sit here today. Obviously, there's, as more information comes to light, that stuff can change. But I do think there's value in getting into where different analysts project guys in mock drafts.
And you view Walter Nolen as the clear number 2 defensive tackle in this draft. Is that correct?
Yeah, as we sit here now, I think so. I think when you look at the way that he is able to disrupt both the pass game and the run game, and just win into multiple ways, he is behind Mason Graham DT2 in this class. And honestly, I don't think that the separation is large between those two either. I do think Graham's ahead as I sit here right now, but I don't think that it's this huge chasm between the two.
Yeah. I mean, he's a former top recruit. Transfer to Ole Miss, right? And then you just consider the Jalen Carter comp, as you said, that would be an ideal scenario for the Eagles. The second part of that question is your favorite deli decides to name a sandwich after you. So the Fran Duffy special, and allows you to build it. What is that sandwich?
So if I'm going like a cold, like a deli sound, like cold cuts, I would say like some of an Italian hoagie. So we're talking, all of your classic Italian meats, probably a little bit spicy. So they're throwing some, some heat on there. But then if you're like, I'm more of like a hot sandwich person, like, like
Yeah.
toasted, you can get it in the oven. Like, I love any kind of chicken bacon ranch combo. That's something that you usually can get me going. So I would say those would be the two go-tos.
This is a bit of a flex, but there
Oh,
was a
you have a
sandwich
sandwich
named
named after you.
there was a sandwich named after me back in 2013, 2014. There was a place called Jake's Sandwich Board. Shout out to Jake's Sandwich Board. It's not there anymore, but it was a good spot on. It was like I think it was 11th and Sansom or thereabouts.
Okay.
And it was I would go in there and I didn't know if I wanted the cheesesteak, the chicken cheesesteak, or the roast pork. Okay. And so then I said to them, what if you had a sandwich that combined the cheesesteak, the chicken cheesesteak, and the roast pork? And so I have this picture on my phone. I can even share it. The ZB special that's what it was called, the ZB special, and it was cheesesteak, chicken cheesesteak, roast pork, all in one with fried onions. It was awesome. Yeah, here you go, Jake. I'm sorry, Jack said I used to work at Jake's 12th and Sansom, legendary 50/50. What's up, Jack? 12th and Sansom. Yep, great spot. And that was a good sandwich. I enjoyed that. I see Jake's. What's that?
How often would you eat a sandwich?
So how often would I eat that sandwich
Yeah.
well, that one was a special in September that I think they kept for a little bit thereafter. But I would probably go there twice a month. I used to walk to the Inquirer building on 8th and Market. I lived
Right.
on at that time 15th and Locust. And so I used to pass by there, and I was friends with the owner. And yeah, I mean, I enjoyed I enjoyed my cheesesteaks, right? I mean, I wasn't married at the time. I don't know if I'd be allowed to do that now, but that sandwich was awesome. And there was actually a
Between
milkshake
that
at the
and the
time too.
sleep schedule, I'd be worried about your heart health long term.
Yeah, me too. Me too. That's why I stopped doing that. But that was yeah, that was a good sandwich. All right, let's roll actually to the third question on here, okay? Which is the third draft question. This is from Jamie, Jami. Of the draft positions that the Eagles will focus on this year, which one do you think could possibly have the biggest impact right away, depending on the person drafted?
It's a good question. Obviously, look, a lot of it depends on how free agency goes and what the Eagles decide to do in the pro market. But it's got to be one of the defensive linemen, right? Unless they draft a linebacker high that would compete with whoever is next to Zach Bond, if they bring Zach Bond back. But I think if you're looking at, let's say the Eagles lose both Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, we both liked what we saw from Mora Ojima. We both like
Yeah.
what we saw from Jalix Hunt. But if you draft a first-round defensive lineman or a first-round outside linebacker, you would expect that person would probably get reps ahead of either, and would be counted on to be an impact player and a key part of the rotation. And so, in terms of like who could make the fastest impact, I think it would be someone at either of those spots, as opposed to if it's a first-round offensive lineman.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if they draft a first round offensive lineman, my guess is that's a wait and see position, or that's kind of develop him. If there's an injury, he steps in. But I think defensive lineman or edge rusher would be someone who would play right away. I also see in the chat tight end. I don't think the Eagles take a first round tight end, but this is a good tight end draft class, second round, third round, and I can see that tight end, depending on what happens with Dallas Goedert, or even not, becoming the number 2 tight end. But I can see that guy playing right away. So before we get to the next draft question, we're going to take a minute here and hear from our sponsors. I want to tell everyone about Rothman Orthopedics. The Eagles showed the value of being healthy. And if you want to be healthy, Rothman Orthopedics, that is the place to turn. if you have joints aching, hands cramping, if your back's out of whack, Rothman's got you. At Rothman Orthopedics, they practice specialized care, and they've been doing it for over 50 years. Their mission, high quality, compassionate, and affordable care rooted in research leading to new treatments and better outcomes. Each Rothman doc is laser focused on their specialty, hip, knee, spine, you name it. They have a team for each body part right in your back part in your backyard. So you can cross over the defense, drain those jump shots. I don't know if I'll drain those jump shots, but and root for your teams like no other fans in the country. They're Rothman Orthopedics, and they specialize in you. Rothman Orthopedics specialized in orthopedics and you. Visit rothmanortho.com/PHLY to learn more and make an appointment today.
And now we're here from our friends from Bet365, because we know whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Bet365 has 80 million users worldwide, and Bet365 live streams 780,000 events each year. You've got those early payout offers across NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLB. Bet365, they pioneered that live in-game betting. So you've got the widest range of games and markets available for those live in-game bets across 78 sports, not just those 4 major professional leagues that I mentioned, but whatever you're looking for, whatever you're watching on TV, you can get on it and put in a little bit of a wager there on Bet365. And now, look, we only have a few days left. We're recording this on Friday, February 21st. On the 26th, so next week, that's the last time you have this open account offer where you've got the new customers can now jump in, get $100 in bonus bets when you bet just $5, win or lose. You get $100 in bonus bets. Sign up, use the code PHLY365. You deposit $10 and place a bet for $5 to get $100 back in bonus bets if your bet wins or loses. So bonus bets can be used. They can be used on the spread. They can be used on totals, player props, futures, and much more. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and physically located in PA. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem and wants help, call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Let's go here to the super chat before we get to the next question. From our friend Shay, who also submitted some questions. Just to prove it, Zach, can you pronounce salmon? I can pronounce salmon. There was a Discord channel that thought I would say salmon because of my mispronunciations of words. But no, I know how to say salmon. I am working on Patulo in a way that does not make the Discord frustrated.
For the record, I thought you said Kevin's name just fine. I don't think you need to adjust.
I screenshotted that message. That is, there's motivation there. Joan and I can commiserate. I texted Julia. I don't know if she got it or not, but I found the picture while you're doing the chat, or I'm sorry, the ad of the ZB sandwich from 2013. Right. So Julia can put that on the screen just as confirmation that I'm not making this up and I got this sandwich correct. I'm going to read this to you. Okay. Chicken, pulled pork, ribeye steak, sriracha spread, topped with fried onions and provolone. Man, how about that? And the milkshake special that month was the Pennsylvania Dutch birch beer milkshake. So
we know you love that. Yeah, can I tell you one of my favorite sandwiches, and I don't think this place is open anymore. We used to be at, like, when I was at Temple, it was at like 2nd and Girard, I believe, 3rd and Girard. It was Paisanos, and they had they had this sandwich where it was a brisket, I think it was like an Asiago sandwich or Asiago cheese and like a pepperoncinis. It was just a remarkable sandwich. As you were talking about it, that got me thinking of the Paisano.
Yeah, agree with you there. I used to love Paisanos. Let's roll down, Julia, to I'm sorry, excuse me. I'm sorry to be jumping around to the 5th draft question, and this is from D. Tosti. Do the Eagles value the 5th-year option availability of a first-round pick more than the average NFL team? And how big of a draft grade drop-off does it take for them to keep the 32nd pick as opposed to trading down for more picks? So just to kind of set the scene here, the last time the Eagles had the 32nd pick, they traded out of the first round. They traded down to into the second round. They drafted Dallas Goedert in the second round. When they were on the board at 31 a few years ago, they planned on trading out. Then Nolan Smith fell. Typically, teams don't have 32 first-round grades. Presumably, the Eagles won't have 32 first-round grades this year. So it's unlikely that at 32, they'll be drafting a player that has a first-round grade. So I'll open the floor to you. Is the fifth-year option that important? Do you see the Eagles trading back this year?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely can be important, and it's more important at certain positions than others because you start getting into like the franchise tag value for certain positions, and are you likely, if you're the Eagles, you typically like to get deals done with guys you want to keep early as opposed to waiting it out and getting into that situation. But I think at the end of the day, like you'd rather have that flexibility than not. But you still have to weigh like, okay, what value can you get in return? If you're talking about, trading back into the second round and getting future 2 or getting a 3 in this draft and just adding to the to your reserves there from a pick standpoint, I think that might outweigh flexibility on one contract with one player 4 years from now. And so you're constantly fighting those battles in terms of, trying to find an edge wherever you can. But I think that at the end of the day, you probably you're just going to take take that value if it's there.
I'm going to combine my answer actually with this next question, and that's the one right before this, Julia. I'm sorry to keep jumping around, Julia. Julia's doing a great job producing because I'm reading these out of order. If Jeffrey Lurie is already talking about compensatory picks in 2026, does that mean it's more likely Howie will use the 2026 picks they have now to trade up in this year's draft? Under this scenario, the future compensatory picks can make up for any that are traded away. This is a good question, and I think this is relevant because I do think the Eagles, by draft day, they will have a sense of what their comp picks will be. They'll know the players out. They'll know the players in. They will have internally an expectation of, are they getting 3 picks next year, 2 picks next year. And I do think that they will be aggressive in trading from next year's inventory accordingly. Okay. Or it could be the type of thing, and I can defer to you on this, that they look at next year's draft as better than this year's draft, and they want more picks next year. So it could work both ways. But the reason I bring this up is I think the Eagles are more likely to trade back this year than they are to trade up. I think there's a better chance that there's not much of a difference for them between pick 40 and pick 32, or pick 45 and pick 32, compared to the difference between pick 23 and pick 32. If they were in a situation where they would trade up, I think they'd be more apt to trade a pick next year, expecting compensatory picks. I don't think they would be in a situation this year where they would only have 1 pick in the top 75, let's say, right? I don't think they would do that. I think they're more likely to trade back, but I do think they will use compensatory picks next year to inform them in how they do it. But look, it wouldn't surprise me if we do a 6-hour draft show or whatever it is on the Thursday night of the draft and the Eagles don't make a pick, because if I was putting my turkeys on it, I actually think the Eagles are more likely not to pick in the first round this year than pick in the first round this year.
Yeah, I think that's the prevailing sentiment, I think, when you're talking about the Eagles right now. But I do think you have to kind of, obviously, I'm not telling you this, but just for our audience, like you have to let the round play out, because it's just like the Nolan Smith discussion from earlier. They didn't expect that Nolan Smith was going to be there at 31, right? And so you don't necessarily always know who's going to be available to you. You want to let the board play out, and if you also need a partner as well. We're sitting here talking, and I could talk about how this draft does not have a ton of talent up at the top. So our people, what's the trade market going to look like in the first round? All 32 teams see that as well. Now, I do think that ambiguity could lead to some dealing, because it might be that it's a beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Where maybe there's only 6 true like blue chip players. I'll just number, but you have a handful of true blue chip players. And then after that, if there's a huge chunk where everybody's all over the place, well, if team A has, this player as the 7th best player in the draft, and team B has him as the 23rd player in the draft, and he falls down, well, now that team that saw him as the 7th best player will make a move up to go get him, right? And so I think that you're going to get a little bit more of that than normal here this year, just because of the ambiguity there. But it's going to be a fascinating night 1 of the draft for that reason.
And the 5th-year option is usually more appealing for a quarterback than any other position.
Yes.
When the Eagles traded back in 2018, it was because the Ravens traded up for Lamar Jackson. is there a quarterback who you see as late first, early second grade, and therefore a team would try to trade up to 32 if he falls?
Yeah, I mean, there's been some talk like Jackson Dart is that guy. I don't know if I quite buy that, to be honest. There's been talk about Jalen Milroe as well. I think I can probably buy that a little bit more just because of his youth, his character, and his traits. I think that's something that you can probably buy into a little bit more so as opposed to Jackson Dart. But I would say that chances are that both of those guys are going to fall into the second day and not be first round picks. But maybe we get different words through the grapevine next week.
Let's go to the second to last draft question here. I don't have who this is from, but this is: do you agree that linebackers, edge, and D tackles are the Eagles' three biggest needs? If so, which position is Howie most likely to address through free agency, and which is most likely to address through the draft? And I wanted to use this as also as a way to talk about player that is pretty polarizing in your eyes, and that is Jalen Walker. Because Jalen Walker, I bring him up as a part of this question is because he is potentially a linebacker. In your board, he's an off-ball linebacker. Some teams view him as an edge rusher. He's seen as high as a top 10 pick. There are mock drafts where he could be falling into Eagles territory. So do you agree these are the Eagles' three biggest needs? And also, how does Jalen Walker kind of fit into this question?
Yeah, I think that, as we sit here, knowing what the expiring contracts are, it's tough to argue with those being not being the three biggest immediate needs for this team, right? And we could argue about, is offensive tackle for the future. You talk about tight end, possible replacement for Dallas Goedert. What is the right guard situation? But I think overall, you probably have, you feel pretty good about those for right now because Tyler Steen can plug in if Mekhi Becton leaves. You still, Dallas Goedert is still under contract. So I think when you look at it, D tackle with Milton Williams impending departure, Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, Bryce Huff questions at defensive end, and then with Zach Bond in free agency and Nakobe Dean's injury, those would be the biggest needs I would say going into the new league year. As far as Jalen Walker, Zach, I think I've watched more snaps of Jalen Walker than any other player in this class based off just from the 2024 film. It's been a little bit of a roller coaster because I watched him for the first time in the middle of the season. And I want to say it was like October, maybe early November. And I watched 2 or 3 games and I knew what the idea of him was, right? Like it was, all right, this guy that has played 50% off ball as a true stack linebacker, 50% down on the line of scrimmage. And I watched him and I'm like, yeah, like, I think that he's a linebacker, but he's more of like a Sam linebacker. And honestly, like a little bit of a situational player. And talk to people, with some friends about it around the industry, it became, well, look at him more as a pure edge rusher. Don't worry about the linebacker stuff. Just watch him as a pure edge guy. So I watched him again, and I'm like, okay, I could see him, maybe, potentially maybe being a starter, but that was only like one extra game that I watched, and I said, all right, I'm going to put him here for now, knowing that everybody was like raving about what he had done as a pass rusher. I said, I'm going to label this. I'm going to come back to it once I have the full season's worth of film, and I can come back to it and make a more educated opinion on it. So over the last day, I've watched, basically what I did was I watched every single snap against Power 4 competition from this year down on the line of scrimmage. I watched every single one of his pressures. And I said, okay, let me just watch and see like how he got his pressures, but then also watch him just purely down on the line of scrimmage. And I'm gonna be honest, like athletically, I don't see like a first step, like explosive, like demon off the ball, like a guy that's just gonna win first step. Like he's not like a Micah Parsons, he's half linebacker, half defensive end. He could just win off the edge. He's not that first step quickness type of guy. He's not a technician, obviously. Only being he's kind of a jack of all, master of none type of player. And then from how he got home, like in terms of how those pressures happened, so many of his pressures happened because he was unblocked. Maybe like they put 6 guys in the line of scrimmage and they didn't block him off the edge, or they ran a cool stunt and he was able to come free, or he's coming up from linebacker late, and so then they just didn't pick him up. Look, he had some wins where he beat the left tackle or he beat the right tackle, but to me, not enough where I'm like, okay, yeah, I feel good about him as an edge rusher. So I am like, I have to keep him with my linebackers. So I moved him back to my edge. I moved back to the linebacker board. And as I'm continuing to watch more, I'm like, all right, like even watching him as a linebacker, I don't think that he like sees the game like at such a high rate that I'm like, oh man, like, yeah, like I feel really good about him being a 3-down, like impact player playing from depth. He's not a great athlete. And so to me, what I would say, it's more important for Jalen Walker to test well next week than any other player in the draft. He needs a great testing regimen more than anybody else to kind of secure round 1 status. Because to me, like I see a guy that's going to test fine, like solid, not special. And if you're an edge rusher, I don't think that at 200, sub 250, that a fine workout is gonna move the needle there. I think he's a very interesting debate. He's a very versatile player. I'm not saying that he's like a terrible player and you can't use him, but I can't buy top 20 talent, with Jalen Walker based off what I've seen from film.
So I'll defer to you on the, excuse me, I'll defer to you on the evaluations. But, I do this job too, and I'm looking at things from the Eagles' perspective. And I really like Jalen Walker. I look at it like, this might seem hyperbole, but a Zach Bond, Nolan Smith hybrid, right? In that he can do different things. I look at the production that he had. It was November, he plays against Texas, number 1 team in the country. He's, I think, 3 sacks in the first half in that game. He's 20 years old, right? So from a body perspective, still developing. He's a 1-year starter at Georgia. So from a skill perspective, still developing. I look at the way he played, the production that he had, and I'm just really impressed by him. He is I think he's a guy who's going to be better 3 years from now than this year. And yeah, I see in the chat, of course, ZB loves the positionless player. Yeah, because I see tools that can be developed. And something that jumps out to me in the draft is what rare tools do you have, right? Do you trust your coaching? Do you trust your player development team? Can you develop those tools? And I believe Jalen Walker is that type of player.
Yeah, so I do want to see, like, if he tests great, then I'll say, like, okay, there are the rare tools. I question whether or not his tools are rare. I guess that's where I get hung up. Like, what I ended up writing as my comp for him is Leo Chenal, he's a really good player, a key part of that Chiefs defense, like a very useful player in that defense for Steve Spagnuolo, but not a guy where I'm like, oh yeah, like you're drafting him in the top 20. That's where I get hung up with Jalen Walker. I'm very open to being wrong on it, but I'm fascinated to see how he tests next week.
For sure. And the second part of this question, I'll just hit on this quickly. I don't think Howie's going into the draft trying to plug holes here. I frankly don't think Howie's going into free agency trying to plug holes. I think the Eagles really like their depth. Now, if they lose Zach Bond, then linebacker's a spot that they clearly need to plug. But I think when you look at some of the other spots where let's say they lose Mekhi Becton, I think they like Tyler Steen, and they can have Tyler Steen compete with someone else. If they lose Milton Williams, they like Moro Ojima, and they can have Moro Ojima compete with somebody else. Edge rusher is a spot where I do think they're going to look to add someone to contribute right away. But if they lose Darius Slay, I think they like the guys that they have. I think the Eagles really like the depth on this team. I don't think they're going to free agency saying that they need to address position X, position Y, position Z. Now, look, if Dallas Goedert goes elsewhere, that's part of the question here. But I think that the Eagles really like their depth. We're going to hear from our sponsors before we get to one final draft question, and then we'll move on. So let me pull this up here. I want to tell everybody about Ace Home Hardware Services. Ace Hardware Home Services. Because, look, I'm at home right now, and fortunately, my heat works. If my heat didn't work, the first call I would have is to Ace Hardware Home Services. If I had a faucet that was leaking, I'm not the person to do it, but I know the person who can fix it. That is at Ace Hardware Home Services, because now they're not just the helpful hardware folks, they're also the helpful home service and repair folks. Air conditioning issue, leaky pipe, from plumbing, the heating, the cooling. They have the trusted pros to keep your home humming all year long. Ace Hardware Home Services. We're bringing helpful home, the helpful you love, from the store to your front door. Visit Ace Hardware Home Services online at www.acehardwarehomeservices.com to get you started on your next project.
We'll now hear from our friends at Golden Nugget Jewelers, because the Eagles, a couple weeks ago, they got their ring. So if you're looking for yours, now's the time. You can head on over to Golden Nugget Jewelers, where for the past 30 years, they have operated out of the very same location in the heart of Philadelphia. Customers from across Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and even Baltimore and New York City, they all travel to come to Golden Nugget Jewelers to find that perfect engagement ring or wedding band. Their staff is highly trained and dedicated to providing a personalized shopping experience. A vast selection of engagement rings are at your disposal, along with high-end watches, fashion jewelry, sparkling diamond necklaces, bracelets, earrings, and a whole lot more. I've mentioned before, if you want to get a replica of the Eagles Super Bowl ring or just a piece of jewelry to remind you of that 2024 season, you can go head on over to Golden Nugget, and I'm sure that they can help you out there. And you always receive that final cleaning and written appraisal with every engagement ring purchase. Golden Nugget Jewelers has been a family-owned and operated business since 1987, right there on Chestnut and 8th Street in downtown Philly. You deserve an expert and the best price. Golden Nugget Jewelers, where Philly gets engaged. Visit goldennuggetjewelry.com today to learn more.
Before we get to Winston Gordon's question, we have a quick super chat here. This is from our friend Chase Daniel Plainview, who loves to support us. We appreciate it, Chase. Hey, Brats, what are your favorite Charlie XCX songs? I hope that did not get me in trouble saying that. Do you have your favorite Charlie XCX song?
Yeah, I got nothing there for CDP.
Chase,
I was hoping you'd have an answer there.
I appreciate the contribution. Unless Charlie XCX plays for Georgia or Notre Dame, I got nothing to tell you right now. Thank you, though, for your contribution here. This is a question here from Winston Gordon that I was excited to ask you. And I've been a big Fran Duffy fan for the past decade, but I also recognize that where you worked before, there were certain things you couldn't necessarily get into, right? And so I'm curious, this is from Winston Gordon. What are the three most common indicators as a player, the most common indicators a player is an Eagles target? I want to say it's good RAS, which for the uninitiated is relative athletic score, and top 30 visit, but please correct me. So without giving, I respect that there's only so much you can get into, but what indicators should fans look at and say the Eagles actually do like this player?
Well, it's complicated with the Eagles because, let me take you one step back. So Zach, one thing that I've done for the last several years is I kind of keep notes on all 32 teams in terms of, and their decision makers in terms of draft strategy, the types of players that they bring in on the draft, and not just in first round, but all throughout, day 1, day 2, day 3. And you kind of build a profile of a typical prospect might look like. Some of the things some lines they might not be might not be willing to cross. Some things that trend more towards, hey, this team, Chris Ballard, they love drafting athletic physical specimens, right? If a guy has a low RAS score, he's not going to Indianapolis, where I'm pretty sure like everyone that they've drafted especially in the first 3 rounds have had an RAS of over 9, and the perfect score is a 10. So, I think when you're looking at certain teams and certain decision makers, it's easier to find those trends. Now, Howie Roseman he's been in Philadelphia for a long time. He's worked with a handful of different coaching staffs. And I think that Howie and honestly, the best general managers do this. You want to change based off your coach. You want to work hand in hand with your coaches, and that might affect the types of players that you bring in. And so there might be some through lines here and there, as you mentioned, the Senior Bowl is certainly one. I mean, the Eagles have attacked the Senior Bowl, especially in early rounds, just the round, but second round, third round, at one of the higher rates in football. So that's certainly one area we say, okay, like if a guy went to Mobile and he's going to be an early round pick, that's someone that you can keep an eye on, certainly for the Eagles. But depending on the coaching staff here in Philadelphia, sometimes if they bring him in for a 30 visit, that's a telltale sign. Sometimes if they don't bring him in on the 30 visit, that's not as much of an indicator, right? And so, some teams are better than others at that. I do think that when you look at the coaching staff, though, and say like, okay, what's important to the head coach? That's important. And I think when you look at, Nick Sirianni and he always preaches like the dog mentality aspect of things, right? And, we can laugh at that. But I think when you look at the players that they've bought in, a lot of those guys like represent that. Right. Like, have that kind of mentality, whether it's on the field, off the field, they bring that same level of competitiveness, of juice, physicality and violence, on the field, rep after rep after rep. And so I think when you're looking at that is something where I say, if a guy doesn't have that type of play personality, you're probably not drafting him, in the first couple of rounds if you're the Eagles. And so I would say, like, if you start checking a lot of these boxes, that's when you start to say, like, okay, this guy makes sense as an Eagles fit. Although I will say, doing this for all 32 teams, doing this over the last several years, you can have all of that. Sometimes you can never say never, and so teams will always buck a trend. It's a trend until it's not, with all of these things.
That's a good point. That actually, the first question, Joy, you don't need to put this on the screen. I will read this. This is the first draft question, but this ties into what you just said, so it's a good follow-up. With draft season upon us, this is from James Rohan. With draft season upon us, how much credit does Nick Sirianni deserve for the Eagles' success in the draft since he became the coach? Howie obviously makes all the final decisions, but looking at the hits they've had along with Nick's emphasis on football character, is he a part of that drafting success? And I thought this was interesting. We didn't get to it because it's more theoretical as opposed to like you preparing for the draft here. But now that you brought it up, I think it's worth noting. Howie is in charge of the draft. Like, this is, to use the Eagles fans' expression, Howie season, right? And Nick isn't like, rigid about X, Y, and Z. But the thing that Nick does talk about is football character. So what's your perspective on this question in particular?
Yeah, I think that you certainly give him credit, right? I think when you're looking at, because the big thing when you have a head coach, the coach staff, you have to crystallize to your scouting staff, to your general manager, to the decision maker, this is what we want. And if the better that you can outline that, then the easier it is for the general manager and for the scouting staff to go in and find those players and pinpoint those players. And so, one of the strengths, in my opinion, of Howie Roseman and the way that he goes about the draft process is that he is taking all of this information, not just from the coaches, but and getting their opinion on players. Some of those coaches, they carry a lot of weight in the evaluation process, but also it's the opinions of everybody that comes in contact with these players over the course of the process. Take all of that information in, and then you're making the best decision on, and sometimes that means putting your own opinion to the side, your own evaluation to the side, and saying, hey, you know what, like maybe I don't, see this player that way, but the consensus does. The coaching staff, they're the ones that are going to be using this player. They have conviction here. I want to make sure that I put them in position to work with the players that they want to work with. So, to me, I think that's one of the strengths of Howie Roseman's process.
There are so many good questions here. I'm sorry we're not getting to all of them. We'll hit a few more here in these next 12 minutes. Let's jump to off-season questions. The third one now, Julia. And this is, do any of the rookies drafted 4th round or later make a leap and become significant contributors next year? So you're looking at Will Shipley. You're looking at Jeremiah Trotter Jr. You're looking at Aniyah Smith, Trevor Keegan, Johnny Wilson. Anyone here jump out to you as a player who could be a contributor for the Eagles next season?
I would say the one with the best possibility is probably Jeremiah Trotter Jr. just because of the Nakobe Dean injury. I think that he's got the path to someone that can come in, and it depends on, how they feel about it. My guess is that, all right, you bring Zach Bond back. If they bring Zach Bond back, that opens up one spot there with Nakobe Dean's injury. And we'll see exactly what that recovery looks like from a timeline standpoint. But bring back Aaron Burks, let's say, on a 1-year deal to potentially fill in until Nakobe gets there, and then who competes with him for that starting spot? Is Jeremiah Trotter Jr. given a shot to compete for that job? The other guys, I just don't know that there's an easy path right now. Especially if Kenny Gainwell's brought back. Is Will still the RB3? Or does he become the RB2 and Gainwell's out the door? I guess that would be the other answer, right?
I would agree there. I think Shipley would, Trotter Jr. and Shipley, certainly with Nakobe Dean's injury, Trotter Jr. could have a pathway to early playing time if the Eagles bring back Bond and they don't bring back Ord Burks. And let's say they have, let's say Nakobe's slow getting back. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. would be the potential starter early in the season. The first offseason question here. In terms of trading a QB this offseason, would you simply take the better offer if multiple offers were made for Pickett and McKee, or would the McKee offer have to be significantly more than the Pickett offer?
I think it would be the second. I think the offer for McKee would have to be better than the Pickett offer. Just from a contract standpoint, from a youth standpoint, from a play standpoint, I think McKee is the better player right now, and he's younger, and he's got more left on his deal. So I think that would have to be the answer.
how's this quarterback draft class? Because that would factor into this. Obviously, if you're going after Pickett, it's probably as a bridge quarterback. You're probably thinking similarly to what Justin Fields was last year, where maybe he's competing with a veteran or he's kind of filling that spot while a team drafts and develops a quarterback. And if he plays well, good for him. Probably similar to what Sam Darnold was for the Vikings. They drafted J.J. McCarthy, and Sam Darnold turned out to be really good. If you're trading for McKee, my guess is you're viewing him as a potential starter for you, right? So the quarterback draft class factors into it. What's your read of the quarterback draft class?
Not great. I think when you look at overall, the talent at the top, certainly not what it was a year ago. I think when you look at the middle part of this draft, you just go back to last year where you had, 5 go, 6 go in the first round, 6 went in the first round, and then another one didn't go until the 5th. I don't think that there will be that deep gap this year. I think that there are going to be a couple of guys that go on day 2. We talked about Milroe and Jackson Dart. I think Tyler Buck is the player from Louisville that's going to go relatively early in this draft. And so I think there's probably more of a class this year, and that might fit where you're talking about in terms of like a potential starter, bridge type of quarterback, a guy that you might give a shot to win some snaps. But I think overall it's not a great group on the whole.
Let's go to Madonna's questions. These are 3 questions. I don't think this is the real Madonna. This is there are 3 questions here. The first one is outside of the most obvious needs of D-tackle, edge, and eventual Lane Johnson replacement, assuming Bond returns, is there a position or player type you could see the front office surprising us with in terms of asset allocation? Not to the same extent, but similarly to last year's Saquon spending.
How about, would it shock you if like the best player available was an outside corner and decide that, okay, we want to keep Cooper DeJean inside, Darius Slay, is he back or is he not? Isaiah Rodgers, is he back or is he not? And Keely Ringo, maybe we just like him as the 4th corner. Maybe he's the development hasn't been there. Not to say that it hasn't been. Maybe there are people in the building that feel that way. And so that could be a surprise. I'm trying to think of anything else there. I'm looking at the rest of my list.
Yeah, the position that I think would surprise. Safety? Yeah, safety is what I was going to say. Whether it's in free agency or in the draft, look, they have Sidney Brown, who they still have to figure out, right? Reed Blankenship he's been a good starter for them. I don't know if they view him as the long-term option there. C.J. Gardner-Johnson was really productive. He's not signed beyond this year, right? Or I think he might have. Well, I think in terms of where the guaranteed money is, there's not a strong guarantee beyond 2025. So you look at that, and we saw Daniel Jeremiah, who used to work for the Eagles.
Yeah,
he had Malachi Starks going to the Eagles in the 1st round. That was probably based more on value than it was based on like position. But
how do you like?
I have a type. The Georgia defense is my type. I will admit that. Height, weight, speed, right? But Starks, to me, he's been a playmaker for them, and he's someone he started as a true freshman. And I've said this in the past: when you start as a true freshman on Kirby Smart's defense, like to me, that says a lot about your football character, like your toughness, your intelligence. Like Kirby Smart is not just putting you out there because you're a 5-star guy. Kirby Smart's putting you out there because you're better than the other 5-star guys on his team. Malachi Starks has started since day one there. He's someone who I really like. But I can see safety just because I still think they like Sidney Brown. I just don't know if Sidney Brown is, if they could say this guy's a definite long-term starter for us.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That would be the other position I would look at is it could be a surprise. Just it depends how you use Sidney Brown long term.
The second part of this was reading the franchise right now. Zach Berman, thoroughly enjoying it. Thank you very much, Madonna. I appreciate that. The third part, though, this is more important here. 2 months out, Fran Duffy, is there a specific player in this draft you really love to see in Midnight Green?
I've got an off the wall rather answer for you. Yeah, someone we talked about. Bo and I talked about him on the PHLY draft show this week. We were previewing next week's combine, and like basically the buckets that we were talking about with certain players were players I expect to do well, players who it's going to be most important for next week, and then also who are some Eagles specific fits. I want to go tight end. I expect to be an early day 3 selection. Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech.
Ooh.
And the reason why is that this guy is a stellar blocker. And I think if you're the Eagles, and if you're gonna say, okay, we're gonna be a run first operation, we're not worried. I don't put Grant Calcaterra and CJ Uzama, and if Dallas Goedert is still here, like and he gets dinged up, you're going to be counting on those guys to win at the point of attack. Give me a guy who's got athletic traits, which Hawes does. The production wasn't always there. He's only a 1-year player at Georgia Tech. Was at Yale previously, and still didn't put up big numbers at Yale. He was just a dominant blocker, and he's not like a stiff athletically. A player like Jackson Hawes on day 3, like that's music to my ears watching this Eagles offense.
All right. I don't love blocking tight ends, but I will take your word for it. I did once love Darnell Washington, so I'm kind of being hypocritical.
Georgia.
Yeah, there you go. Yes, I do have a type. But then again, so does Howie Roseman. All right, so if there's someone who I'm thinking of, like, and by the way, a week from Monday, I'm going to have it might be 17 steps this year, but last year was a 15-step guide to the Eagles offseason. If I were Howie Roseman, it's a piece I've done the past 4 years or 5 years. It's something I really enjoy doing. So you can see that if you're a diehard on allphly.com. 3 minutes left. I saw in the Discord people said I was going to make this all football, not fun. So we'll just do some quick hitters here on the non-football questions. First one here. So there's 2 from Claire. First one, ZB, Peckness migrate, the West Wing, the American President, and then the third one's Moneyball. I love every Aaron Sorkin a TV show and movie, but I am definitely nesting the West Wing because you have all those seasons. I will peck the American President. I will migrate Moneyball. I like the book more than I like the movie. But here's one for you from Claire. What are your top 3 college food cities that have both great student unions and good food? Let's just talk about the good food because you don't have to go to the student union.
I'm gonna be honest. I haven't been to well, no, I take that back. The thing is that when I worked at Temple, the Temple was in the MAC, right? And so it was a lot of my road trips were to the small college towns in the states of Ohio and Michigan. So we're talking Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, we're in Michigan, Ypsilanti, Michigan. Then you get into Ohio, and it's like Green and Oxford. Now, of course, they're in the AAC, and it's like, oh, they're going to Memphis and Tampa and Houston and Dallas. But I'm going to be honest. I don't know if I've got a feel on this. I'd be interested to get your take because obviously when you covered Virginia, you had a better feel on some of the bigger name college towns. But what's your take there?
Yeah, before I tell you, I just want to thank everyone who's watching on Fast, and you can tune into YouTube for the remainder of this show. You know what? This is what I'll say. I know the audience jokes that I think everything's a good food city, but when I went to these college campuses, like, you're hitting one spot, right? So you're hitting the staple, okay? And so I always liked going to Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill had a place called Spanky's, and they had these brown sugar baby back ribs that I used to every time I went to Chapel Hill, I would knock that back.
Do you prefer is Carolina barbecue your favorite style of barbecue?
It's a good question. I had more exposure to Carolina barbecue than any other barbecue. That's the vinegar based. I probably prefer Texas barbecue, honestly. Yep. But the older I got, the less forgiving the barbecue was for me. So, but when I was in college, I had more North Carolina barbecue than I would care to admit. I would do about 8 or 9 trips a year to North Carolina to cover, Tobacco Road games. And I would go to every single barbecue spot you can imagine. So I like Chapel Hill more than I liked Winston-Salem. Shout out to, I would say, Lincoln, Nebraska. I was in Lincoln, Nebraska a few times. Had some good meals there. And then I thought Tallahassee was an overrated food city. Didn't like that. But my
So
top
is that a
three.
shot at a shot at the person you met on the plane who hosted you for the Eagles game?
No, his food was good.
Tallahassee, wasn't it?
His food was good. The main strip at Tallahassee, I didn't like that one as much. Good memory there. Love Charlottesville. Love Blacksburg. Had great meals in both those towns. I know I'm not giving you a top three. If you can't find good food somewhere, then the problem is you. It's not the city. Real quick here, what qualifies as finger food for you? What are the best and worst finger foods?
Obviously, this is based off your charcuterie hatred.
Yes.
To me, you can't go wrong with any kind of like buffalo shrimp type of situation. I love a cheesesteak egg roll. I mean, the classic at our house is, any mozzarella stick, we're usually on board.
There you go. And then last one here. This is from OK Max Legroom. What is the most exotic food you are willing to eat that you haven't tried yet?
I would say that I'm fairly adventurous.
Yeah.
And so I think that Meg is texting me about why we're talking about food on the show so much. I would say that what's something I haven't tried though? I think I've tried like most things that I know what my boundaries are. Like I'm not a big like raw fish guy. So like I won't usually cross that line, but any other kind of like meats or anything, I'm usually pretty adventurous.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah,
Wherever I am, whatever I try to kind of blend into the culture. So whatever they recommend, that's why I asked the waitress or the waiter what do you recommend, and I've eaten all kinds of I think I had rabbit when I was down in New Orleans because that was recommended to me, right? So yeah, I kind of rolled the punches there.
Said to you, I think I said to you in New Orleans that the last time I had rabbit, I was in a restaurant with you or in Mobile, but you were sitting at a different table. I was sitting at a table. I had rabbit dumplings.
I wish I was at the table you were sitting at. Because what's that?
Claire checked in and said, I've had shark, I've had mako, I've had yams, colangelo, I've had frog. No, I like. There's a couple people saying they don't like frog. I like frogs. Yeah, I've had pretty much all that stuff.
Real quick, we have a super chat here, or let's just knock off these super chats. I know I told you, and I told you 1 hour, so we'll knock these off quickly. In a YouTube short, this is from Manifestable Brett C. Banfi. In a YouTube short video at Super Bowl, Bryce Huff mentioned he's staying off his feet. Any reason why he'd say that? Was there an injury there? His injury was to his hand, from what I understood. I know for a fact. Staying off his feet, I think probably just going to rest up this offseason is my guess. Thank you for that contribution. Next one, same person. Brett C., you're helping us out here, man. Would Jack Sawyer or Cody Simon be a good fit? This is an Ohio State fan.
Yeah. Cody Simon is an off-ball linebacker who, had a really solid season, for them. I think that he can fit what Vic Fangio likes to do. Jack Sawyer, I'll be interested to see where he tests next week. I don't see a plus athlete when I watch Jack Sawyer. Certainly in the run, holds up well at the point of attack. Great character off the field. So I think, to me personally, he profiles as more of a backup, more of a day player, but I'll be interested to see where he ends up going in the draft.
And then final one here from Mad Dio. South Carolina is a true Carolina barbecue with mustard, not vinegar. Thank you for that clarification.
I like a South Carolina barbecue.
Yeah, me too. I spent a lot of time in Clemson. Always a good place to go. I think there's a restaurant called Esso that I used to go to. From Grace Min, before the wire here. Favorite cocktail for both ZB and Fran. Fran, your call first.
Shrimp cocktail from St. Elmo's and next from St. Elmo's Steakhouse next week.
Good answer. Look, I like an old fashioned, so guilty as charged there. And then as a shout out to the longtime listeners, or not even longtime listeners, to the 6-month listeners, a Caprihino from Brazil is a good cocktail. Sorry we didn't get to all your questions. I want to do this again. Sorry, we have another one. I got to read the chats, the super chats. Geoduck, this is from Mad Dio. Geoduck equals best clam only in Pacific Northwest. Thank you for that contribution.
Like that.
I appreciate these questions. We need to do this more often. Please tell Bo. If you tell him it's Fran Duffy's idea or Greg Rosenthal's idea, he's more apt to do it than if you tell him it's my idea. But we should do mailbags more often. This was fun. Before we wrap up, Fran, just give us 30 seconds, 60 seconds, whatever you would like on what's ahead for you for the next week, because you won't be on the show as frequently, but you'll be all over the network.
Yeah, so I'll be I head out to Indianapolis on Monday afternoon. I'll be out there from Monday until Monday. So workouts begin on Thursday from the Dome at Lucas Oil Stadium. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'll be spending it's like 7 hours each day, in the bowl for the workouts. There'll be plenty of press conferences leading up. So all the head coaches, most head coaches and general managers around the NFL speak starting on Tuesday. So you'll get a lot of that coverage around the NFL Tuesday and Wednesday. The players themselves start to speak on Wednesday, and they go all the way up through Friday. And basically the cadence there is the players that work out, the day before they work out, they meet with the media. And so on Wednesday, you'll be hearing from the positions that we talked about a lot today. It'll be the front seven. So defensive line and linebackers. Then it's the DBs on Thursday because they work out Friday. Offensive skill on Friday for Saturday's workout. And so, and then the offensive line on Saturday for Sunday's workout. And so we'll be talking to lots of players, talking to lots of coaches, general managers, scouts around the league. The entire NFL convenes on Indianapolis next week. You and I will be out there for PHLY, and it's going to be it'll be a long week, but a fun week.
That's the best draft analyst in the business, Fran Duffy. You can find his work on allphly.com and throughout the All-City Network. Thank you, Fran, for being with us today. Thank you, Julia, for your outstanding job producing. We will be back. There's the picture of the sandwich. I wasn't making it up. That is the ZB special from Jake's Sandwich Board. I would say rest in peace but I didn't need it enough that I am still here. But that was a great sandwich. Bo and I will be back on Monday. I head to Indianapolis after the show. We will have all your coverage then. Until then, Bo will say, as always, we love you. I will say we'll do better next time. Thanks for watching.
We all silly like the mayor.